Greetings, gentlemen. Yes, specifically, gentlemen, because if you clicked on this video, it means you have more gasoline in your bloodstream than white blood cells. It means you are from that endangered species of people who know exactly what overheated phenolic plastic smells like, how a twin Weber carburetor sings at high RPM, and why the scent of unburnt hydrocarbons is the finest perfume humanity has ever created. We live in boring times. Today, cars are designed by marketing departments and approved by environmentalists. They are safe, they are quiet, they are economical, and they are absolutely dead inside. But there was a time when engineers ruled the world, and not just engineers, but absolute madmen. The period from 1960 to 1970 was a decade when automotive engineering went off the rails. It was the era of LSD, the Cold War, the space race, and absolute, unrestricted creative freedom. Designers would wake up in the morning thinking, why not put two engines in a car? Or, let's make the body out of glass. Or, what if we fill the gas tank with Chanel No. 5 perfume? And nobody told them no. Nobody twirled a finger at their temple. They were given a budget and told, build it. Today, I will guide you through a gallery of the strangest, wildest, most dangerous, and most magnificent cars of that era. We will see machines that could swim, machines that ran on tequila, and machines where survival was statistically harder than winning Russian roulette. This isn't just a top 10. This is a chronicle of a lost paradise of automotive engineering. Get comfortable, pour yourself something strong and dark. We are starting the countdown. 10. Bond Bug, 1970 to 1974. Opening our list is a vehicle that looks like a wedge of cheddar cheese left out in the sun. 10th place, the Bond Bug. Picture Britain in 1970. The Beatles have just broken up, Led Zeppelin is rocking stadiums, and at the Ogle Design Bureau, they decided that 4 wheels for a car was too bourgeois.
3. That was the number of the future. The Bond Bug is the quintessence of the 70s, a bright orange, and only orange. The factory basically didn't offer other colors. Wedge-shaped body made of fiberglass. It had no doors, none. To get inside, you had to lift the entire roof, canopy, and windshield all at once. It looked dramatic, right until it started raining, or until you drove into a garage with a low ceiling. Under the hood, although hood is a relative term here, as the engine was located right inside the cabin between the driver and passenger, sat a unit from the Reliant Regal. 700 cubic centimeters, 29 horsepower, or in the ES version, a whopping 31 horsepower. Sounds laughable? But this orange flea weighed only 870 pounds, 394 kilograms. The sensation of driving a Bond Bug can be compared to trying to ski downhill in a trash can. You sit inches off the asphalt. The engine screams right into your right ear. The suspension is as stiff as Margaret Thatcher's upper lip. And most importantly, those 3 wheels. The stability of the Bond Bug was, let's say, conditional. If you entered a corner too optimistically, the world outside the window could suddenly rotate 90 degrees. Nevertheless, the Bond Bug was marketed as a sports car. Yes, a fun car for the youth. The ads claimed it could hit 76 miles per hour. Those who actually tried to take it to that speed claimed that at 60 miles per hour, the front wheel would start living its own life, and prayers would come to mind automatically. Only 2,270 units were produced. Today in Britain, it is a cult classic. If you show up in a Bond Bug at a Ferrari meet, everyone will be looking at you. Because many people have a Ferrari, but only the chosen few own an orange triangle of death. 9. Subaru 360, 1958 to 1970. 9th place. We moved to Japan, and then to the worst nightmare of an American insurance agent in the late 60s, the Subaru 360. In Japan, this car was called the Tento Mushi, which means ladybug. It was cute, tiny, and fulfilled the task of mobilizing a post-war country. But in 1968, an enterprising businessman named Malcolm Bricklin decided that America, the land of massive Cadillacs and Mustangs, was missing exactly this: a car the size of a Lincoln's key fob. The Subaru 360 weighed just over 900 pounds. The engine was a two-stroke, two-cylinder, 356 cubic centimeters unit. It put out 25 horsepower and sounded like an angry lawnmower. The car accelerated to 60 miles per hour in about 37 seconds. That is, if the wind was blowing from behind and the driver had skipped lunch. But the scariest part wasn't the dynamics. The scariest part was the construction. The doors opened against the wind, the so-called suicide doors. The bumpers seemed to be made of chocolate wrapper foil. Crumple zones? In this car, the crumple zone was your kneecaps. In 1969, Consumer Reports bought a Subaru 360 for testing. Their verdict became legendary. They wrote, "The most unsafe car on the market." In the event of a collision with an American bumper, which was located exactly at the height of the Subaru driver's head, there were 0 chances. They rated it not acceptable. Yet people bought them because it cost $1,297. It was cheap. The slogan read, "Cheap and ugly does it." Today, the Subaru 360 is a JDM-style icon. Collectors are willing to pay between $30,000 and $50,000 for a pristine example. But driving one onto a modern highway is an act requiring nerves of steel and a complete lack of self-preservation instinct. 8. Peel Trident, 1965 to 1966. 8th place, the Isle of Man, a place that hosts the most dangerous motorcycle races in the world and builds the weirdest cars in the galaxy. The Peel Trident. You've probably heard of the Peel P50, the smallest car in the world. But the Trident is its more glamorous, more insane brother. The engineers at Peel looked at the P50 and thought, too cramped and too dark.
Let's build a flying saucer. The Trident is a microcar chassis covered by a transparent plastic dome. It was a veritable spaceship for the poor. Length 6 feet, width 3.5 feet. Theoretically, it had 2 seats. Practically, it had 2 seats if the passenger didn't mind wrapping their legs around the driver. Instead of doors, the entire dome flipped forward. You entered the car like a fighter pilot. The engine, a 49 cubic centimeters DKW moped motor, producing 4.2 horsepower. Top speed, around 38 miles per hour. But the Trident's main problem wasn't speed. The problem was physics. The transparent plastic dome worked as a perfect magnifying lens. On a sunny day, the temperature inside the cabin would rise to levels suitable for roasting a chicken. Air conditioning? Of course not. Ventilation? None. You drove in your own sweat, slowly turning into a haute cuisine dish, all while looking like a character from The Jetsons. Only about 80 units were produced. Most melted or fell apart. The survivors are the holy grail of microcars. At auctions, prices for this plastic aquarium reach $150,000 to $180,000. For that money, you could buy a brand new Porsche 911. But every dentist has a Porsche, while a Peel Trident is a ticket to the club of the planet's most eccentric people. 7. Citroën 2 CV Sahara 4x4, 1960 to 1967. 7th place, France, the land of wine, cheese, and engineers who solve problems in ways inaccessible to normal logic. The task: a vehicle is needed for geologists and oil workers in North Africa. 4-wheel drive is mandatory. Reliability is critical. If the car breaks down in the middle of the Sahara, you are dead. How would the Germans solve this? They would build a complex system of transfer cases and differentials. How did the French solve it? They took a Citroën 2 CV and put a second engine in it. The Citroën 2 CV Sahara is an automotive schizophrenic. It has one engine in the front, like everyone else, and a second engine in the trunk. Each engine, 425 cubic centimeters and 12 horsepower, has its own gas tank under the front seats, its own carburetor, its own ignition, and its own transmission. The gearboxes are connected by a single linkage, one gas pedal, one clutch, but 2 ignition keys. You can start only the front engine and drive in front-wheel drive to save gas. You can start only the rear. Why? Well, for fun. Or you can turn both keys, and then this ugly duckling transforms into a four-wheel drive off-roader. The absence of a heavy transfer case, drive shafts, and differentials made the car incredibly capable and light. If one motor died in the middle of the desert, you simply drove home on the other one. Genius? Absolutely. Crazy? Of course. The gear lever stuck out of the floor like a fireplace poker. The noise from two engines running slightly out of sync sounded like a rock crusher. But this car could go where Land Rovers got stuck. Only 694 were built. Most perished in the sands of Algeria and Tunisia. Today, a real Sahara costs a fortune. Auction prices start at 100,000 euros and go up to 200,000 for perfectly restored examples. It is the most expensive way to look like a French farmer. 6. Amphicar Model 770, 1961 to 1968. 6th place. The dream of every 60s schoolboy that became a reality. The Amphicar 770. This is the only civilian amphibious car in history to be mass-produced. It was created by German designer Hans Trippel. The idea was simple. You drive to a picnic, the road ends at a lake, and you don't look for a bridge. You just drive into the water. The Amphicar was equipped with a 1.1-liter engine from the British Triumph Herald, producing 43 horsepower. The 770 designation meant 7 miles per hour on water and 70 miles per hour on land. Although owners joked that it was the fastest boat on the highway and the fastest car in the water. In reality, it was a mediocre car and a mediocre boat, but who cared? 2 nylon propellers stuck out the back. When you drove into the water, you pulled a special lever to switch the transmission. The wheels disconnected, or worked alongside the props when exiting onto the shore, and the propellers began to spin. Steering was done by the front wheels. In the water, they acted as rudders. This meant the amphibian's maneuverability was comparable to an iceberg. The most famous story involving an Amphicar concerns U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson. He had a ranch in Texas and a powder blue Amphicar. He loved to prank his guests. LBJ would put unsuspecting politicians or friends in the car, accelerate down a steep hill straight toward the lake, and start screaming, "The brakes failed! We're all going to die! Ah!" Guests would prepare for death in terror. The car would splash into the water and simply float on. Johnson would laugh until he cried. But ownership had a dark side. Water tightness. After every trip into the water, you had to grease 13 points on the chassis. If you forgot to do this, the car was ruined. If you forgot to screw in the drain plugs, you sank. 3,878 units were produced. Today, it is the star of any collection. The price for a good example is around $80,000 to $120,000. And believe me, there is no more spectacular way to leave a beach party than to simply drive away into the ocean. 5. Messerschmitt KR 200, late 50s to 1964. 5th place. Technically, production started in the 50s, but it lived and sold actively through the first half of the 60s, and it's impossible not to mention it. The Messerschmitt KR 200. After the war, Germany was forbidden from building airplanes. But the engineers at Messerschmitt didn't know how to do anything else. So they built a plane, clipped its wings, and attached 3 wheels. The KR 200 Kabinenroller is a death capsule. The driver sits in front, the passenger strictly behind, tandem style. Overhead, a plexiglass canopy that hinges sideways, exactly like a Bf-109 fighter jet. There is no steering wheel. Instead, a yoke, resembling bicycle handlebars or an aircraft control stick. The engine, a single-cylinder 2-stroke Sachs, 191 cubic centimeters, 10 horsepower. But the aerodynamics were so perfect, aviators built it, after all, that this thing could hit 65 miles per hour on 3 tiny wheels. The KR200 had one feature that blows the minds of modern drivers. It had no reverse gear in the transmission. To go backward, you had to kill the engine, push the ignition key inward, like a button, and turn it. The starter would spin the engine in the opposite direction. The motor would start backwards, and you suddenly had all 4 gears available for driving in reverse. Theoretically, you could hit 60 miles per hour in reverse. Practically, it was a surefire way to kill yourself. This was a machine for those who feared nothing. Low center of gravity, stiff suspension, it handled like a go-kart. In the 60s, they were replaced by more traditional cars, but the image of the messer on the road remains one of the era's most vivid symbols. 4. NS Euro 80, 1967 to 1977. 4th place. Tragedy and triumph. A car that was 20 years ahead of its time, but stumbled over technology. The NS Euro 80. In 1967, the world saw a car that looked like it had arrived from 1990. While other manufacturers were building chrome-laden bricks on wheels, NSU unveiled a wedge-shaped sedan with a massive glass area and a drag coefficient of 0.355. Even today, that is a respectable figure. But the main event was inside. A Wankel rotary engine. No pistons moving up and down. Only 2 triangular rotors spinning in oval chambers. 115 horsepower. The sound, like a turbine. Vibration, completely absent. At 100 miles per hour, it was so quiet in the cabin you could hear a clock ticking. It was a revolution. Semi-automatic transmission, no clutch pedal, the sensor was in the shift knob. Disc brakes on all wheels, independent suspension, front-wheel drive. Journalists voted it Car of the Year 1968. And then the catastrophe began. The technology for the rotor seals was immature. The engines wore out catastrophically fast. By 20,000 miles, compression was gone. By 30,000, the motor was dead. NSU Row 80 owners would greet each other on the road by holding up fingers to indicate how many engines they had replaced. 1 finger, 2, sometimes 3. Fuel consumption was monstrous, and the engine consumed almost as much oil as gasoline. Warranty repairs bankrupted NSU, and it was absorbed by Audi. But the Row 80 remains in history as Europe's boldest sedan. Its design became the foundation for the Audi 100 and defined the look of cars for decades to come. Today, with modern seal materials, restored Row 80s run reliably, and owners enjoy that very turbine thrust the engineers of the 60s dreamed of. 3. Mazda Cosmo Sport 110S, 1967 to 1972. 3rd place. If the Germans at NSU stumbled over the rotary, the Japanese at Mazda forged it into a samurai sword. The Mazda Cosmo Sport 110S. This is the world's first mass-produced car with a 2-rotor engine. Mazda bought the license from Wankel and bet everything on it. Mazda's engineers, the so-called 47 Ronin, fought for years against the problem of devil's claw marks, chatter marks on the engine housing. And they won. The Cosmo Sport launched in 1967, and my God, how it looked. It was a spaceship from an anime, low, long, with futuristic taillights that looked like rocket afterburners. The interior resembled a starship cockpit. The 10A engine, displacing just under 1 liter, produced 110 horsepower and later 128. The tachometer redline began where ordinary car engines exploded, 7,000, 8,000 RPM. The rotor spun effortlessly, emitting a characteristic high-pitched whine. The Mazda Cosmo proved that the rotary could be reliable. They sent the cars to the 84 hours of Nürburgring Marathon, and they finished. Only 1,176 Series 2 cars were made. They were expensive, complex, and rare. Today, the Cosmo Sport is a shrine of the Japanese auto industry. Auction prices reach $150,000 and up. It is the car that told the world, Japan isn't just about cheap copies, it is about high technology. 2. Citroën SM 1970 to 1975. 2nd place, a car that was supposed to be the best in the world, and for a short time, it was. Her Majesty, the Citroën SM. By 1970, Citroën was the king of innovation, but they lacked a powerful engine. What did they do? They simply bought the Italian company Maserati, just for the engine. The result of this marriage of convenience was a GT coupe that looked like a UFO. Under the hood, a Maserati V6. Under the body, the famous hydro-pneumatic suspension that allowed you to drive over a plowed field at 120 miles per hour without spilling your champagne. But that wasn't enough. Engineers introduced the Diravi system, steering with variable assist. The steering wheel returned to center by itself, even if the car was standing still. From lock to lock, only 2 turns. Drivers had to relearn how to drive. The slightest twitch of the wrist would throw the car into the next lane. The headlights, 6 of them under a glass cover. The inner 2 swiveled with the steering wheel, looking around corners. The license plate was also under glass. The rear wheels were covered by fender skirts. This was the car of kings and dictators. It was driven by Leonid Brezhnev, Emperor Haile Selassie, the Shah of Iran, the Rolling Stones, Graham Greene. It was a symbol of the absolute superiority of technology over common sense. Unfortunately, the 1973 oil crisis and the complexity of maintenance killed the SM. Mechanics feared it like fire. An Italian temperamental engine plus French insane hydraulics. It was a hellish mix for service. But when an SM is working properly, there is no car smoother, more majestic, or stranger. 1. Chrysler Turbine car, 1963 to 1964. And finally, first place, the absolute peak of insanity, the holy grail of alternative history, the car that ran on jet propulsion, the Chrysler Turbine car. The early 60s was the jet age. Everyone wanted to fly. Chrysler decided to put a gas turbine engine, essentially a helicopter or jet engine, into a road car. They built 55 vehicles. The body, painted in turbine bronze, was designed by the Italian studio Ghia. The design was stunning. Rear lights shaped like turbines, and inside, a center console resembling a fuselage. But the main event was the engine, the A831 gas turbine. 130 horsepower, but monstrous torque. 425 pound-feet, available instantly from 0 RPM like an electric car. The engine spun up to 44,500 RPM. Idle speed, 22,000 RPM. This engine was omnivorous in the literal sense. Engineers claimed it ran on anything that flows and burns except water. It was fueled with diesel, kerosene, JP4 jet fuel. The president of Mexico filled one with tequila, and it ran. In France, they filled it with Chanel No. 5 perfume, and it worked, leaving a trail of expensive fragrance behind it. Chrysler took an unprecedented step. They didn't sell the cars. They gave 50 cars to ordinary American families for 3 months for free. The program lasted 3 years. 203 people, average Joes, became pilots of jet cars. People were thrilled. No vibrations. Heat in the cabin appears instantly. No oil changes needed. Only the sound. The sound of a vacuum cleaner the size of a house mixed with the whistle of a fighter jet taking off. At stoplights, the superheated exhaust would melt the plastic bumpers of cars behind it and the asphalt itself. So why aren't we driving turbines today? Fuel consumption was high, but mostly emissions, nitrogen oxides, and the cost of producing turbine blades from exotic alloys. The finale of the story is tragic. After the program ended, Chrysler, fearing taxes on imported Ghia bodies and parts complications, decided to destroy the cars. 46 vehicles were crushed and burned before the eyes of weeping engineers. It was barbarism. 9 cars survived. Most are in museums without engines. Only 2 or 3 are left in running condition. One belongs to Jay Leno. When he starts it up in Los Angeles, every neighbor hears that whistle. It is the sound of a future that never arrived. Conclusion:
There you have it. 10 cars that proved the 1960s and 70s were a time when the impossible became metal, glass, and rubber. The Bond Bug, Subaru 360, Peel Trident, Citroën Sahara, Amphicar, Messerschmitt, NSU Row 80, Mazda Cosmo, Citroën SM, and the great Chrysler Turbine. They were imperfect. They broke down. They were dangerous. Some of them were frankly ridiculous. But every single one of them had a soul. Each had a character that cannot be programmed into an engine control unit. Today, we drive efficient, safe capsules. But sometimes, stuck in traffic, you want to close your eyes and imagine that under your hood isn't a Turbo 4, but a howling gas turbine running on tequila, and instead of a steering wheel, a fighter jet yoke. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, support the channel with a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next eras, and write in the comments, which of these 10 cars would you risk putting in your garage, assuming you had an unlimited budget and a fantastic mechanic. Preserve history, gentlemen. Stay real. See you next time.